It is daunting. It's exciting. The thing is that I'm trying to find the sweet spot between. I mean, he's an iconic character. He is an incredible person, but he's a person. He's an incredible person, but he's a person. So I'm trying very hard to find the person. But as I've often said, he's not a bookkeeper. He's not a barista. He's Robert E. Lee. So it's trying to find that that middle point between. But for example, the summer after Glasnost, I was in Prague and having a wonderful time there, and I was at a bar. Now in Czech, at a bar there isn't any such thing as your table. It's all communal tables. So if there's an empty seat, you can take it. And when you get your beer, there are waiters who will come around, and if the waiter comes, they just put a hash mark on your beer coaster, and you pay for the coaster at the end of the night. Or you can get up and go to the bar, right? So being there the first summer after the Berlin Wall had fallen down, nearly nobody spoke any English. But it was cool because I was learning Czech frighteningly fast. Like it was the first time I thought maybe there's some credence to the idea of past lives. Because I couldn't explain to myself why I was learning Czech so fast. I'd learned other languages, but nothing Slavic, nothing with a Slavic origin, or no Eastern European languages whatsoever. So anyway, so I'm there and I'm stumbling with I'm by myself, so I'm at this communal table and doing the best I can, and I can't get a waiter. So just as I'm going up to go to the bar, some guy walks through the front door, this little disheveled guy in a kind of frumpy coat and his hair off to one side, and everyone at the bar kind of turns and goes, "Hey!" like, on Cheers with Norm, "Hey!" And he kind of waves and comes in, and we end up at the bar at the same time. We start chatting. He knows everything about show business. He knows everything about sport. He knows that he's incredibly well versed in literature. He's incredibly intelligent about politics and current events. He knows, and he's just like one of the most incredible. We whipped through my Czech in a matter of moments, but he spoke English, so we had this protracted conversation, which was great for me because I hadn't been speaking English to anybody since my friends left. So I'm chatting with this guy. We've been chatting for 30, almost 40 minutes, when suddenly I realized, oh my gosh, I'm talking to President Havel, the first president of the Czech Republic after, this is right after the separation. I couldn't believe it, but because here's just a guy, but he's one of the most influential figures in contemporary European history. So I guess that's a long way of going, what's that kind of character is like? Well, it was Václav, no entourage, no secret servant, just having a cigarette and talking and chatting, but it was, a man who had served time because of his writing, had changed the face of the Czech Republic and nearby countries, had a big effect on European as a whole. So, I guess he'd be an iconic character too. It was doubly fun and exciting and embarrassing because I liked his work so much, and I should have. I don't know why I was so stupid. I should have known that sooner, But I guess when out of time and place, you don't know what you're doing, and I certainly didn't. So what's it like to play an iconic character? I don't know. I guess I'm trying to find. I guess he's a real person with very specific attributes, qualities, ideals, level of commitment that's exceptional, and he's a person. So I guess what I'm doing is really trying to find out what his wants and needs are, and trying to decide what I need to do to get what I need. And in this play, we're in the final moments of the war, but the war is still on, and we're hoping, the Confederates were hoping to be able to regroup, and up until the very last moment, that's what we're going to do. We've been, they had been fighting against, listen to me, geez, they've been fighting against incredible odds from the beginning, so I guess, is serving the wants and needs of the character and the people that he finds important to him. Well, you know, rehearsal, that's why we have these little gatherings, as we say, about rehearsal. You know, a lot of it came here. One of the things that was really neat is what was incredibly helpful to me was my parents live in Minneapolis. That's not what's helpful. My parents live in Minneapolis, and they live in a wonderful sort of assisted living community, a beautiful apartment place that's a few blocks away from the Walker Art Institute, where the Guthrie Theater used to be before they moved it, where I kind of had the origins of my little career. But they live. They have someone they eat there with a lot. One of their neighbors, one of their friends, is this gentleman who is a historian. He's a military historian, and Mr. Scheer had this book that he loaned to me called The Last 9 Days, and which is about the final moments of the Civil War. And it's this incredible collection of anecdotes and stories. They're all absolutely factual. It was written by a historian in 1959, a guy from, I believe, the University of South Carolina. He published some other historical accounts as well. Incredibly well written, out of print, and he sent it to me, and I have been devouring that. Some of the stories, it's just given me so many images, so much imagery, which is so important to playing a part. One of the subjects that we deal with in the show a lot is the starvation of the men, is the physical demand that was on these people. As hard as the soldiers from the Union were working, and the effort that they had to make to be down there in Virginia pressuring Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia. The Army of Northern Virginia themselves had all of that going, plus they were on the run, plus they were not eating and not getting food to eat. They couldn't even forage because this area had been so worked over. It wasn't like they weren't finding food. There was no food to find. And the physical effort that they were making is something that I think most of us don't really have a sense of. We talk about 4 in the afternoon, oh my God, I'm starving. Not the same thing, you know, and we well know that, but something that was really helpful to me for relating to that, for envisioning that, was my experience as a wilderness guide. When I was in my 20s, since I was a kid, I went to and then later worked at a wilderness expedition camp in northern Minnesota, a YMCA camp called Camp Widgiewagon, as a matter of fact, referred to affectionately as Widgie. And we did canoe expeditions, and these were from when I was a kid. The first-year campers would it would start at age 13. First-year campers would go on 10-night expeditions in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, which is a place with no roads, nothing. It's absolute total wilderness, and then it adjoins the Quetico Provincial Park above it. So as you got older, you went on longer and longer trips till the oldest groups, which were referred to as voyageurs, used to take 60-day trips into the Arctic. So I went through this whole program, and when I was an advanced explorer, they called it, we did a trip deep into, we were up on the English River, and we packed light on purpose, intending to fish to augment our eating, and for whatever reason there were no fish to be caught. We just couldn't, and I was very experienced. I knew how to catch fish, and we couldn't catch anything, and we were hurting. We were, and we were canoeing 20 miles a day, which is about as much as these guys were marching, and you used to have to, you know, this is an area that if you look at a map of northern Minnesota, southern Canada, it looks somewhat like the hood of a car that's freshly waxed after it rains, just lakes. So you paddle down the lake, and then you portage, you put everything on your shoulders and your back, and you walk to the next lake, put it all back in, and take off. And we were doing that day after day after day. And I had been, you know, I was athletic in addition to doing theater in high school. I was, you know, a runner and a wrestler, and I was very athletic. And yet you go on these canoe trips and you're paddling all day long, and then you're portaging all day long, and paddling all day, you know, after that, and portaging, stopping, cooking, going to sleep, getting up in the morning and doing it all over again for 30-some days in a row. And we were really low on food. And we had given some food to another group that had had a bear attack and didn't have any food, so we were even lower on food. And that was my best experience of what starvation must feel like. I wasn't starving, we were being nourished, but you know, it was not the same as these guys eating hardtack. Do you know what hardtack is? It's flour with water and a little baking soda, I believe. It was basically a way for them to be able to carry flour portable so they could eat it. And you know, we had trail lunch. We were eating rye crisp and salami, raisins, and peanut butter, and every lunch, and that was enough to kind of keep going. We got to the end of that trip, and we were up in Savant Lake, Ontario, where the railroad was going through. We were going to catch the train there, and we said, you know, we just walked into like a little cafe there and ate everything they would give us. And just, I'd never experienced that kind of hunger. Well, interesting. How can you not be interested? I mean, Robert E. Lee, I don't need to give anyone a history lesson, because I think one can go to the, you know, vast sources of information and get it better than I could possibly tell it. But you know, it's just fascinating to learn about this guy, that he was second in his class at West Point, that he had a very successful career in the United States Army. He had been offered the leadership of the Army of the Potomac to be the head general of the Union before he resigned his commission and retired to Virginia. Before he resigned his commission, retired to Virginia, and was asked by Jefferson Davis to lead the Army of Northern Virginia itself. That he had led the Union effort at Harper's Ferry just previous to the war. That he had served in the war against Mexico, Mexican-American War, that he had engineered during the Mexican-American War, that he was against secession, that he was pro emancipation, and yet he owned slaves. He and his wife were both pro emancipation, and yet they both owned slaves, which I guess is perhaps comparable to people today who perhaps might be thinking of themselves, you know, can be very pro-green, be very ecological, and own stocks to petroleum companies or pipelines or whatever. Although I do not, by any stretch of the imagination, want to equate the ownership of human beings to the ownership of shares in an oil stock. It's not, only people is not the same. One of the things that's been challenging about doing this is that I have been very interested in civil rights history, and obvious, maybe not obvious, but pro civil rights. I had one of my best theatrical experiences of my life was directing Amiri Baraka, LeRoy Jones' play, who later changed his name to Amiri Baraka, his play Dutchman, which Amiri came out and saw and told me was his favorite production of the play that he'd ever seen, which was an incredible honor. But that, that's sort of more my fach more my interest, more my milieu, if you will. And you know, when I was asked to play Robert E. Lee, I've never identified with the Southern cause. I've always looked at the Civil War from a Northern perspective, frankly. Being from Minnesota, having had family that served in the Union, you know, I never looked at the situation from that side of the coin, and it's been very educational to learn an appreciation of that perspective, though I still don't personally share it. And yet, you know, to be that guy, I need to be able to put my shoulder behind what it is that he's fighting for which he's fighting, if you will. So that, you know, that's been very educational.